then we can get into kind of like what makes a good video, what are the keys when you're creating a hook, even a title, the branding of the YouTube thumbnail, the TikTok, preview, like all that stuff matters a lot from the way I understand it. And so I'll hand the mic to you, and maybe you can start with ZOP and talk about how you kind of move from the traditional studio into being able to generate business online.
Yeah, so I think I'll just start with just a general overview of kind of why I decided to put so much energy into social. And then I have a slide deck that I put together that I can share with everybody that does go over like the key factors of, what I've discovered in my journey. I'm still on my journey to learn socials and everything. And so I can kind of go over those principles too. But yeah, I mean, the main reason I wanted to start like posting on socials is I knew the project that I'm developing that I can talk about too a little bit more is an animation for virtual reality, something that's pretty niche and something that is probably would appeal to a very small group of people. So I realized what I wanted to do was try to scale up on my social media sites and accounts so that I could have a larger people and base to be able to pitch this to. And maybe if I can curate some people that are interested in both animation and virtual reality, like separately, then maybe they would be interested in hearing more about my project. So that was the reason I wanted to invest so much time in, is because I knew I wanted to have an audience to speak to in that regard. Specifically for this project, it has kind of just spiraled out of control, and I've accidentally became a YouTuber, so I didn't really expect that. But that was kind of a nice little detour. But I'm still, focusing on my own project. It's definitely hard to balance those two. But yeah, so let me just share this slide deck. It looks like the screen sharing is disabled for this one.
Let
Is
me
that
give it to you.
I can also send it to you, and
Here,
if that's
I'll
easier.
give you. I'll give it to you. I'm
Okay,
gonna make you the
sweet.
host so that you can
All right.
do it.
I won't kick anybody out, I promise. Maybe.
Just all right. You're the host. Power is yours.
Okay. So let's do this. No, don't lock the meeting. That button changed on me. Okay. There we go. Okay. So can everybody see my screen share? Thumbs up if you can see it. Awesome. Okay. So this is just my general growth guide. I go by the name Know the Robot on the internet as an artist name. This is my growth guide for social media. So I want to start by asking one question to everybody. It's a very important question. The question is, if you stacked Elon Musk's money as $1 bills, how far would it reach? It's kind of an odd question to start this kind of presentation, but the reason I'm asking it is because this was the premise of an animation that I posted online. And the response that I got from this was very overwhelming. It got 2 million views on Instagram. It got 3.5 million views on TikTok. And on YouTube Shorts, it got 31 million views, which is crazy. I didn't know that many people were using YouTube Shorts, so that's crazy. But the reason that I think this video did so well and this animation did so well is because of that interesting question. And I'm going to tell you the answer to how much money he has and how far it will go. But before I do, just a quick introduction again. My name is Zach. I'm a 3D animator and accidental YouTuber. I founded my company a couple years ago after leaving the animation industry and wanting to create my own multimedia animations for social and emerging technologies like VR, where I'm building my own spatial animated short for VR called New Venice. You can learn more about it on my website, sopstudios.com/New Venice. And in the last couple of years, I've built a brand of educational content related to animation and really just investing a lot of my time and energy into building up my socials. And that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. So, the reasons for growing your socials, besides the ones that are very obvious to you guys, would be first and foremost building a brand awareness. Socials obviously offer an unparalleled visibility on a very global scale. You can reach corners of the earth that you would never be able to do before. So that's a really great feature of socials. Establishing credibility, I think, is a really key one here. That's kind of what I've been able to do in the animation niche and community. If you can, carve out your own niche online, you can help establish your brand or startup as credible and trustworthy, and people would want to, go to your channels for that specific reason. And it allows you to engage directly with your audience and foster a community of people that are interested in your startup. And obviously from all this, you can drive traffic and sales, and obviously lead generations from organic reach is just unparalleled on social. So you probably already knew that. That's why you're here. So that's why it's important to grow on social. But so here are some of the key factors that I've learned when I'm, trying to scale up my social media. And these are just some of the factors I've learned: is curiosity, engagement, timing, and authenticity. Authenticity is kind of a newer one, and I'll talk about that towards the end. And I think it's actually becoming a lot more important, but I will start with curiosity. So what I've discovered is humans are just naturally curious beings. If you hand them a puzzle and you present them with a challenge, they will want to see it through or solve the puzzle. So you can take advantage of humans' natural, ability to be curious and creative, and give them content that will make them curious. The first impressions on social media are pretty much everything. First 3 seconds of your video are going to determine whether or not people scroll away. Sometimes, it's the first 1 second. So if you can start your video with something that's really flashy or attention grabbing, that's going to be really key for your video to do well. Obviously, if you're posting on YouTube, the title and the thumbnail should make people want to click on it. So on the left are some examples of thumbnails that I've posted that generate just a little spark of curiosity of like, oh, what is the end of, is AI the end of animation? It kind of gives you that sense to want to click on this video. And these are using what's called a hook. If you're not unaware, a hook is an attention grabber that gets your audience invested in your video as soon as possible. I've always said the hooks should be something that someone can immediately identify very quickly or relate to, using something called a curiosity gap. So what does that mean? Usually, if you are presented with a piece of information and you ask someone for their spin on it, or what they think the end result will be, people watching a video are naturally going to try to guess themselves, and they're going to want to stick around to see the end of the video to see if they got that right. For example, in my own video that I posited at the beginning of this, I presented 2 ideas: Elon Musk, very visible, controversial figure, and a stack of his money. So presenting these 2 premises created this want and desire for people to watch the rest of the video to see, oh, well, how far is his stack of money? And it's actually mind-blowing how far it is. But the general formula for this is like usually A plus B equals ... C. And the reason for the ellipses is because you want to wait as long as possible to reveal what the answer is for those 2 things. So, if someone's lining up for a golf shot and they have a really weird golf club, you're going to want to see them hit the ball, but you're going to stick around, 30 seconds of them, adjusting, waiting and everything. And then they finally hit it and the video ends. The reason that you want to keep people watching as long as possible is because right now, watch time on any social platform is what I found to be the biggest factor to determine whether your video does well or not. When I posted that video on YouTube Shorts, it did really well. And I could see on my analytics that people were curious and they were watching for a long time. So I knew just generally that it would do well on both TikTok and Instagram, without having the secret inside knowledge on specifically how the Instagram algorithm works. Usually the algorithm's job is to just get these videos in front of people and keep them on the app as long as possible. That's the broad oversimplification of the algorithms. So if you give the algorithm content that is keeping people watching until the end, the algorithm's going to be more likely to take your video and run with it. And so that's the first thing, is curiosity. So let's say you have a video and it does really well. It gets 100,000 views, 200,000 views, and you have people coming to your accounts for the first time. That's great. Now, what do you do from there? So the second key factor being engagement, building a community. If you can engage with your audience as much as possible, they will engage back with you and become invested in you. So simple things like just replying to comments that you get is a really great place to start, or just creating specific calls to action. So you can say something like, comment the word booyah if you're excited about this new venture. Or in my example, I'll say more animations on my page. There's a reason videos on YouTube and stuff have people say like, like, comment, subscribe. It's a very simple, obviously that's people kind of tune out now when you say that specifically. So the more specific you can be with your call to action, the better at this point. You can say like, oh, make sure if you're interested in more content like this, you can follow me on my page, etc. I've seen videos that I've posted where I forgot to do a call to action and ones where I did a call to action. And the difference between the two is actually astounding. So also understanding your analytics so that you can engage better with your audience, like retention graphs. So on the left here, you see a video that the video that I posted from earlier, and the retention level of people watching this video. So you can see there's usually always a little sharp drop off, but the longer you can keep that line steady, the more people will be watching. So, by the end of the video, 60% of the people that started the video ended up finishing it. So the algorithm saw this was a really good video because it kept people watching for so long. And that's why it did so well, is because it was keeping people engaged. And so when you're having this type of content, people go on social media for what I find to be two reasons. They want to be educated and they want to be entertained. Now, I think I'm hilarious. I would want to insist that on anybody else. So I tend to focus on more educational content because people, like I said, they're naturally curious. They want to learn. If you have something to say that's very, you can speak to passion about your product or your startup, people are going to be, that's going to be contagious for people, and they're going to want to hear what more you have to say about it. So that's engagement. Timing is another thing. Initially, this was called luck, but I think there is a lot more to it than just luck. I think, I did get very lucky that my video got 30 million views, but I also believe in the Thomas Jefferson quote that says, "I'm a great believer in luck. I find the harder I work, the more I have." I think you can do things to set yourself up to have more luck in the future. So considering, when you're posting videos or pictures or stuff like that, if you're posting it at midnight, no one's really going to see it until the next morning. But by that point, the algorithm has deemed it, that no one's watching it or no one's seeing it. So, making sure that you're aware of when your audience would be online for you to post and for them to see, as many people to see it as possible. As far as, trends go, I think this falls into timing too, because trends often come and go very quickly. They can be fun for short-term growth. And I've definitely participated in like animation trends. I don't do any dancing. I'm not saying you have to do dancing online to grow on socials. But if you have these little fun trends that you can participate in, they're not going to give you long-term community believers and subscribers that way. I decided to take a step back from doing any sort of trend stuff. The Elon Musk video, I think, worked really well because he was being talked about in the media, especially last summer. So people were naturally searching for him, and his name would come up for my video, and that's, it gave it an extra boost. I personally decided to step more back from that and focus on content that's a little less controversial, a little more educational based for animation. But yeah, so consistency as well, I think, is really key, but in a different way than I think every social media guru will tell you, where, you always see the advice of you need to be posting 6 times a day online. I think that is horrible advice if you're starting out, because you can easily burn out, and you can, you'll get obsessed with the numbers and everything, and you'll forget to actually work on the startup that you're trying to push out and make big. So I think consistency is more about being consistent with yourself. If it means you're only posting once a week to start out, start there. That's great. If you can manage to do something small and work your way up to, maybe posting twice a week, 3 times a week, that's fine. As long as you're staying consistent with your own ability to show up and continue to learn and to continue to, study the algorithm and things like that. I think that's where consistency shines more than just feeding the algorithm anything for the sake of just sharing anything. And social media can get overwhelming a lot. So I think avoiding burnout where you can will help you a lot with this, because if you're on this all the time and this is your entire life, being on your phone all the time is not healthy. So obviously, I just want to be transparent with that. And that leads us to the fourth key factor, which is authenticity and the power of being genuine. I feel like audiences right now have kind of shifted from where they were about 5 or 6 years ago, where maybe hyper curated content would do really well on a platform like Instagram or YouTube. But I think TikTok really changed the game with this. It seems like authenticity really works well on TikTok. I find that a lot of videos that I post where it's just me talking in a microphone and, and talking to a truth of some kind tends to do really well. And people see that as, you being transparent and honest with your audience. They're naturally more driven to connect with content that feels relatable. So if you can be transparent with your audience and maybe about some challenges that you have or learning opportunities or mistakes that you made, they're more likely to see you as a trustworthy figure because you're being transparent with them. Obviously, don't share everything, but if you can curate what you're showing to be a little bit more, a little less, I guess a little less curated, a little more honest with your audience. Because at the end of the day, they're interested in you. They're not interested in your product. They're going to keep coming back to your page because of you. So if you can give your audience a reason to root for you and to see your story and your journey from the OGs that start when you have 10 followers, then to 20, and then to 30. If people feel like they're in on the ground floor of something exciting, they will be more inclined to see you and to root for you and to share your videos and boost the algorithm views even more.
Can
So
I,
yeah, that's
can I ask
yeah,
a quick
please.
question about that? Just because I want to make
Yes.
sure we're addressing like the founder mindset as well. So, I think a lot of us have either teams on the marketing side, or it's not so much the solopreneur that we're marketing, it's more of the business. Can you talk to like how do you use authenticity within a startup? And maybe it's still the same thing where you're emphasizing, the founder, but how do you think about authenticity for how a startup should be addressing this?
Yeah, I think something that I've noticed with social media is if I post, let's say I post my final animated piece, it's like a 3-second shot and it's characters doing whatever. If I post a like behind the scenes of that or like, footage of me animating that and then show the final piece at the end, usually that will get more engagement than the original animated piece. And the way that you can take advantage of this is people like to see behind the scenes of things. They like to see the early stages of something. So if you have a VR app that you're developing and you have an early beta version, don't be afraid to share, an early sneak peek of what you're developing with your audience because they want to be in on the ground floor. They want to like, see something really exciting. So if you do post like your final piece or let's say, oh, here's the actual first ad that we have for our app that's done and everything, the people that have been following your journey all along will be way more excited because they will be able to they'll say to their friends, oh, I saw this when it was only at 10 followers or 20 followers, whatever. So there is something exciting about that, and the more you can share with your audience ahead of time in that sense, I think the better for you. And it could be, just time lapses of you working on your project and saying like, oh, it's 4 a.m., the hustle never stops, that kind of thing. But people like to see, behind the curtain as much as possible. So I think when it comes to your VR app or your startup, don't be afraid to show the behind the scenes as much as you can, in addition to the curated little ads that you might have for it. Interview your team, get them on camera, things like that. I think that is something that is that's using the power of authenticity in a way that maybe wasn't the case probably 10 years ago, where people would be more interested in like the final curated thing rather than a behind the scenes thing of it. But that's what I found anyway for authenticity. I hope that kind of answers your question. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so then yeah, just being transparent with you as well. Some real truths that I've discovered in social media. None of this is a guarantee. I've made videos where I follow all the steps. I have a great hook. I post at the right time to the right people, and I'll post it and it flops and no one really sees it. And then sometimes I'll just, take out my camera because I have a thought on something, record myself talking, post it, check back later, and it's got hundreds of thousands of views that I didn't even try for. And like that is kind of the nature of social media, is it's so unpredictable, and a lot of the times the stuff that you don't expect to go viral will go viral. Like the Elon Musk video, I think that's a good example of, oh, I didn't realize 31 million people would be interested in this, but okay, here we are. In that regard too, it does sometimes feel like a full-time job, and it's because a lot of times it is. You have social media managers for a reason, and a lot of this can feel like you are in the trenches of this for many hours a day. But it is about that balance of how much can you contribute, and that's why I say not to subscribe to the theory right away of post every day. Is it's a balance of how much you can contribute to your audience, and also how much you can step away from the social media to actually work on the thing that you're doing. But it does feel like a full-time job sometimes. So just know that going in. And then, a one size fits all approach doesn't really work for social media. What does work for one company might not work for another. But if you're checking out, different pieces of content that do really well, try to figure out why you're watching their video for so long. Is it because they promised something at the very beginning and you're waiting until the end to try to figure it out? Once you start studying how the algorithm boosts what videos, especially with watch time, if the next time you see like a Mr. Beast video, basically all of his videos are structured to have a really compelling hook at the very beginning. Usually money is involved, and then it keeps you watching until the end to try to figure out what the deal is. So those are just kind of in the sense of being transparent and authentic. Here are some real truths with that. So how can you take anything from this and start today of scaling up your social media? I think the first thing you can do that's anyone can do is practice being on camera. This is a really important skill. It's not something that comes naturally to people. I was a faceless creator for many years, and this was my robot avatar that I started making videos through, and I would use this as my public facing thing. And then I realized actually it would be a lot easier for me to produce more videos and reach more people if I did show my face. And I've been posting on YouTube for a long time. That was really scary for me. I never wanted to really do the talking head thing. But once I realized that being on camera is a skill and that you can practice it, you can, start getting really good at it. Everyone hates the sound of their own voice. I hate the sound of my own voice. If you can get over that, that's like the biggest hurdle. But if you can get over that and start being comfortable being on camera, that's going to help you become a little bit more relatable to people that are watching and maybe a little more entertained. Also analyzing, like I said, successful content, see what works, what doesn't. The video that I posted, I asked a really compelling question and I kept people watching until the end. That was just something that I noticed in different videos that when I tried it out, it did work for me. But you should try to discover your 3-second hook if you can. Let's take the example of the classic VR app of it's a medical VR app that has the human body in front of you and you can spin it around and it's labeled. Your hook in that sense, if you want to reach as broad of an audience as possible, you can start with, have you ever studied for a test and thought that you could have a more immersive way of studying or something like that? Starting with something that people can relate to right away and then putting a unique spin on it. And then the answer to that is your startup or your app. That's the game there. And then just staying flexible, because a lot of this does change from year to year. Videos were not really a huge thing on Instagram 2 or 3 years ago. Now that's all that Instagram is pushing for whatever reason. So if you can stay flexible with your abilities to kind of navigate through through the social media waters, that's going to help you even more in the future. But yeah, so just in summary, curiosity, engagement, timing, authenticity, those are the big key factors that I have found to really help me with social media. But if you remember only one thing from this entire presentation, I want you to remember this. Elon Musk's net worth as $1 bills reached over 23,000 miles, which is almost enough to wrap around the entire planet. So maybe if he works hard enough, he'll get it all the way around. So that's my growth guide. If you want to follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, it's @KnowTheRobot. And again, if you want to learn more about my VR app, which is an animated short film called New Venice, you can learn about it on my website, zopstudios.com/New Venice for more info. So thank you for joining me here.
I'm gonna share your links because I think one of the key
Yeah.
lessons I've learned over the last year, and you touched on it, is you really need to find influence from people that are doing it successful. Look at what they're doing and then repurpose, like basically take the lessons and repurpose it to your own self. And I have a presentation I'll give after this is over, once you leave, where I did that successfully in order to get this spatial collective going. So that'll be a kind of cool full circle. But before we do that, so I think 2 things I want to dive into. One, a lot of people have questions here. And so if you have a question, raise your hand. Let's start to get Zach kind of in this open forum conversation. That's how we like to do these. And then also, yeah, Zach, before we start calling on people, can you talk about what is your current process in creating something? So like, do you come up with like, here's 50 hooks I might use in the next 2 months, and you have a list of that? Or what is your actual creative process in order to get to a video being created? And then we'll call it
Yeah.
George and then Jeff after.
Yeah, that's a great question. I started to do that a while ago, and then I realized I was getting burned out with the, trying to follow each hook exactly. So what I ended up doing was creating content that is multi-purposeful. Excuse me. So I will post a video on YouTube, but when I script that video, I'm making sure in my video that it can be broken up into smaller videos. So I will have in the middle of my video, I will say something that can be construed as a hook. So for example, I've done these animation analysis videos where I'm taking the Spider-Verse movie that came out and analyzing scenes shot by shot and just seeing what what the animators are doing. So something that I'll start to get in the practice of when I'm filming is saying things like, okay, watch what the animators are doing here. This is really interesting. And then going into whatever it is I'm about to say so that I can, when I post a long form video, I can then create a short form version that's vertical, but I can start it at that clip. And so the first thing that you'll see is, animator reacts to Spider-Verse. And then it starts with a clip of me saying, okay, watch what the animators are doing here because this is really interesting and you're going to want to see what they're doing. That naturally gets you to be like, oh, well, what are the animators doing? It kind of leads you to that sense of curiosity. So what my current process is trying to take long form videos, focus on them, but with the can repurpose a lot of this content. A lot of the stuff that I will post on YouTube, I can post in full on TikTok. TikTok now allows up to 30-minute videos. I don't know why, but they do. So you can take advantage of that. So I will post, the whole video on TikTok. But for Instagram and even for even more TikToks, I will clip out sections of that long form video that I can then repurpose into short form content. So it's really just about being smart with your time and knowing that, okay, if I'm going to start posting these shorts, I could pull out my camera and go through a list of hooks and just go through it that way. That was sustainable for a little bit for me. I found that I was burning out from that. So I decided to take that more like holistic approach of creating long form content first and then transitioning that into the short form content. So that in the meantime, I can still be making long form stuff that can further be clipped out from there. So that's kind of been my approach, was just taking a multi-step approach to one form that I can then repurpose for others.
Awesome. And Scott, I hope that answers your question in the chat there. He said, is it better to hit every platform you can or focus on one? It sounds like you kind of have your main one, but then you repurpose that tree into all the different channels from there once you have that
and it totally does change depending on the type of content. So I would start with just one to if you're just getting started in this, I would start with like Instagram or something because it allows you to connect with people a little bit better than like YouTube or TikTok. Because usually TikTok, if someone follows you, they're not really going to see it. TikTok wants to show you new things all the time. So Instagram is a place where people can see your stuff because they followed you. And you can start to build out people that will, if you post a YouTube video, you can share it to Instagram and people will naturally want to see it from there. So I would start with Instagram and then focus on building that up, look at different Instagram reels, things like that. And then I would, long form, I would post to YouTube. TikTok, if you can, great. If not, I wouldn't worry about it right now. I haven't been on TikTok in a couple of weeks. Just because I've been working on other stuff and needed to prioritize some other things. So I would, to answer your question, Scott, I think the multi-purpose approach is good for when you get going, but initially just focus on one.
Awesome. All right, cool. George, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Congratulations, you're kicking us off.
Hey, Zach, thanks for the awesome presentation. Really inspiring. And yeah, congrats on your success, I guess.
Thank you.
So I'm in the beginning of my social media journey. I'm focused right now a lot on short form video because VCs and other people are telling me that this is a must for consumer VR apps, and this is what we have. We have a consumer VR app. So I have actually two questions. I don't know if you can answer one of them. But the main question is, how do you see advertising or boosting posts I guess this can apply to Instagram as well, but I'm particularly interested in TikTok. How do you see that play out in like your daily or weekly postings? And the second question is, TikTok in particular is like super aggressive with geolocalization. So it will show my content. I'm based in Europe. It will show my content in Europe, and VR is not that big in Europe compared to the US. Like I have US is not on my viewers list at all. Not, it's probably in others. I have UK, I have Germany, I have other countries. US is not there. So my strategy is maybe hook up with some content creators that are US based and have them, you know, paid content, have them mention me, and maybe drive some results there, because I heard over time TikTok will kind of understand your geography, your audience geography. But right now I'm like kind of stuck in serving content to people that are not that interested in VR. So
Yeah.
those are my two questions: ads and this geography stuff.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's definitely a tricky one, the localization. Because yeah, it is really just the TikTok specifically is like where people are based, is where the initial spread is going to hit. I'll start with your first question though with ads. I personally in the past on other accounts, I've bought like, so, you know, like a boost in an Instagram post that I have. And I didn't really find the same sense of like audience and community than if I just did something organically. So for the current stuff that I do, I actually don't buy any ads or any like, you know, promotional, like any, like the promote feature on Instagram or on TikTok. I tend to avoid that and just focus on the organic reach and doing things like calls to action in your video of saying like, oh, if you thought this was helpful, please share this with a friend that's interested in VR, something like that. So I will usually try to do something in the video to help, like to encourage people who do watch it to boost the video, you know, on their own, rather than trying to pay for ads. I just find that if you do get a large influx of people from an ad and a lot of people watch your video, it usually spikes right back down to where it was and then just levels out again. And you know, the amount of people that you're going to get from an ad probably isn't going to be the same type of people that are interested in you if you reach them organically. Now, for your localization question, it is tricky. I think the thing that YouTube and Instagram kind of have the advantage of over TikTok is YouTube obviously is on a global scale. TikTok is, I believe TikTok is banned in India. So a lot of that audience will go over to Instagram for the content that they want to engage with. So Instagram and YouTube don't really have a lot of that localization in there already. So for your specific case, I might start with something like Instagram Reels because it will reach a little bit more of a global audience first. But yeah, you can totally link up with other creators and have them tag you, or you know, if you can do collaborations with other US based people or just other people in your niche to show that you're actively engaged with the community and you have something to contribute on that sense. But yeah, the localization for TikTok specifically is very tricky. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I would focus more on like Instagram Reels first, and even like YouTube Shorts. Obviously, you saw the video that did really well in YouTube Shorts. People underestimate how much reach that really does have. So definitely check that out too. But yeah, as far as like, you know, the ad stuff, I would avoid just buying stuff for now, unless, you know, you really want to reach a specific niche of people. But I don't do it myself, if that helps your if you understand that. But yeah, so I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just for like maybe for the audience, I post the exact same content, or like 99% the same content on TikTok and Shorts every time. Some does better on Shorts, most do better on TikTok. On Shorts, yeah, the geography is not an issue. I have US is like 50% of my viewers. And I also post on Reels. I'm just not, I use like Buffer. I'm not an Instagram fan, so I don't do anything else. Fair. I just post Reels, and they have like almost zero traction. It's like it's uncomparable. Okay, I don't want to hog more time. Thank you so much for the input.
Yeah, I hope that helped. Thank you for your questions.
Great question. And just to address the B2B question in the comments, Jason, before we get to Krazy. So after Zach leaves, I also have a little bit of a presentation around LinkedIn and X. And I think that's more for the enterprise side of stuff. However, all these principles across consumer, YouTube, TikTok, X, LinkedIn, they all apply. It's hook based, it's capturing, it's engagement. So, but I'll get specifically to the B2B side of this as soon as Zach hops off here. Krasny, do you want to unmute yourself? Good to see you, and please ask your question.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the great presentation, Zach. I won't frame my question in B2B terms, but just in general for startups, what I've been told that it's working much better, regardless of the platform, is not posting content from your company's account or page, but doing founder-led growth in a way. Seems like every platform out there, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, what have you, they don't promote pages anymore that much. And I wonder what is your experience? This is part one of my question. Part two of my question is, do you also spend time besides video creation, content creation, posting comments on other topics and stuff, or commenting on other users, stuff like that? Happy to word.
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry. So to answer your second question first, I do post about other things on my own channels too. Like I have a niche interest in the Lego Bionica line, and that's kind of the animations that are doing very well for me at the moment. That's just my own like interest and topic. So people like to see that you have, other interests like that. I think the reason why company pages might not be pushed out as much as creator pages is that people like to connect with other people in that regard. A lot of times when they realize that they're being fed an ad, it is off-putting to them. So they might, scroll away if they say, oh, this is for a company. So I think I have not had the experience of managing like my company's social media. That's something I'm trying to ramp up to do. But the way that I would probably approach that is having a face visible first. That is like, either you or someone at your company that is the face of your company, so that people build a trust with that person, the person through the screen, and not focusing so much on every post needs to sell something. It can just be like, for example, I do animation consulting for people, and they will come to me if they're unfamiliar with animation, but they want to make an animated film and they're just not sure where to start. I can consult with them and help them with that. But a lot of times the clients that I've gotten through that have found me through my animation reviews, where I'm just talking, very passionately about animation in general. So if they see you talking passionately about like your, just say VR in general, they might have that connection first, rather than them thinking like, oh, this person's trying to sell me their VR app, so I don't really, trust that person initially. If it comes from the genuine connection of, oh, hey, here's another person that really likes VR. I fell in love with VR several years ago, and I feel like everyone here has a story like that. So if you can share like your story of like, here's how I fell in love with VR. I was in this place and then I got to there and blah, blah, blah. But people want to connect with other humans on social media. They don't, stuff that's AI generated or stuff that feels inauthentic, people can kind of sniff that out pretty quickly. So if they feel like they're being sold something, they might not, want to make that connection. So I think if you're building up a brand page, I would try to focus on the human aspect of it. Again, going back to like transparency and authenticity with this, that's a really key part of this, is making sure that there is that human element that people can connect with. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah, you bet.
Ironically, I think Elon Musk is a great example of founder-led marketing. He's advertising Tesla and all of his different companies just by being his kind of controversial, authentic self. Whatever you think about him, good or bad, it seems to be working for his companies.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So I think Eli has a question that also summarizes Chris's question. Eli, do you want to go for it?
Hey, Zach. Thank you. I love the conciseness of your deck, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about like the workflow life cycle? Like what tools are you leveraging to support you in the creation and the editing, the distribution, the the targeting of target audiences, and maybe even like some of the analytics that we talked about before to kind of evaluate how effective some of those campaigns are.
Yeah, totally. So I'm using just like the basic Adobe suite for like video editing and exporting and things like that. For graphic creation, I'll use Photoshop and After Effects. That's just kind of been my like wheelhouse and my specialty for the stuff that I've done before any content creation. And then for like the actual like analytics of stuff like that, I've definitely the built-in analytics that these apps have in them is a great place to start looking. Especially you, I mean, TikTok and Instagram, the analytics are pretty basic of like, people that watched your video were about 18 to 25. YouTube is like someone in Serbia watched your video at 5:16 a.m. for 40 seconds. Like it gets that granular with YouTube. So definitely start with the analytics pages. The retention graph for sure is like the biggest one that you can start with for your videos, is seeing like, how quickly someone clicked off your video. Like for example, I skipped over this in the talk, but I posted a video a few weeks ago that I realized in the retention graph, it actually started to go down right at the very end. And it's because I realized that I repeated something twice in the same video. So people got what they came for. They got that C in the equation, but I kept talking. So they were ended up scrolling away. So what I realized is if I take that video, take it offline, flip it to where the people started to scroll away and re-upload that video, now it's doing so much better than it was at 10,000 views when I took it down, and I think now it just passed like 300,000 views on YouTube Shorts. So, and that was just me looking at the analytics and the retention graph there and seeing and understanding what that means of, okay, people are scrolling away when they get what they come for. So if you can start understanding your analytics like that are already being given to you on these platforms, that's a great place to start. For YouTube, I also use TubeBuddy. Sometimes I've used vidIQ in the past too. In terms of like, getting engaging thumbnails. Also, ChatGPT is obviously a great place, a great reference for a lot of this too. Sometimes I'll just take the thumbnails that I make, put it in ChatGPT and say, hey, rate this thumbnail from 1 to 10. And is this engaging? Could this be more engaging? And, sometimes it'll just say yes to everything you want to do. But if you can really press it, sometimes it'll say, oh, actually, the colors are pretty muted. So you want to go with brighter colors so that it's more eye-catching and engaging. So yeah, I think just to answer your question holistically, suite for the actual content creation, and just my phone for just starting out with the videos. The first year of me posting on YouTube, I was just using my phone as the camera. So, and then I ended up upgrading later, but that was after I knew that the stuff was working. But yeah, just Adobe Suite, your phone, ChatGPT, TubeBuddy is a good one for YouTube specifically. But yeah, just the built-in analytics, I think that's a great place to start looking, especially retention graphs. If you can understand those, that's going to help you a lot.
And what about scheduling or distribution?
Yeah, I will usually try to schedule posts if I know it's something like, a big YouTube video. I'm still struggling right now with the like actual handling of like the shorts after that. Like I just posted a video on Monday on my YouTube channel. I have to go in and now create little short snippets of that because I didn't do that ahead of time. But normally, that would be something I have all set to go, scheduled like, once every other day. So it's totally possible to just, freewheel it and just, put stuff out in the universe. But as long as you're being, again, consistent with, the amount of work that you're putting in and trying to understand as much as possible, the algorithm will tend to favor that as long as you're, some YouTubers don't post, they post once a month, and that's, you get a really good quality video, but they're not posting every day. But yeah, so different things work for different people in that regard. But yeah, as far as scheduling goes, people are going to be outside on the weekends. So if you're going to schedule stuff, I would do it during the week, usually in the mornings, because they don't want to work, they go on their phone for distractions and they see your stuff. So that's usually what I'll try to do with that. But yeah, don't post anything after like 9 p.m. because people are asleep by then.
Awesome. Richard, good to see you always. You want to unmute yourself, ask your question?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask him about monetization with social media. I heard that I think like on TikTok, if you get like 1 million views, then you can get like $1,000. So I just wanted to ask if you're making any money from like views or from subscribers, or is it just more like about bringing attention to yourself and what you're building and then, you know, trying to make money that way, or if you're not interested in focusing on making money?
No, it's a great question. I am making some money from TikTok and YouTube, very little from Instagram, but a lot of the stuff is so volatile and like ever changing. So for example, on TikTok a year ago, I was getting what's called an RPM, which is like rate per milli. So, you know, based on like your math there of like 1 million views gets you $1,000. That would be like an RPM rate of $1, which is, you know, every 1,000 views you get $1. That was the case on TikTok maybe a year ago. And then the algorithm changed a little bit. They were, you know, threatening to get banned in the US. So the rate that they were paying out for these videos dropped dramatically. So a video that did get me, you know, 2 million views on TikTok, maybe would only generate a few $100 from there, as opposed to, you know, the $2,000 that it would have gotten if it had that higher RPM. So definitely nothing to sneeze at with that. But the monetization aspects, I try not to focus on too much, because you can really get in the weeds of like, you know, how much you're making like per reel and everything. And I've found that it's a little more addictive in that sense. So I personally try to take a step back from that and not worry so much about, you know, how much each reel is making. It's more about, okay, if this tends to do well and gets a good boost and I get paid a little bit more, great. But instead, what I'm focusing on now is sponsorships. So that I've gotten to a point where I'm lucky enough that brands are reaching out to me as well as me reaching out to them with my platform, and showcasing like other products in your videos and things like that. That's where a lot of the monetization these days is focused. And it's not anything that I get like from YouTube as like ad revenue or things like that, even from TikTok. I consider that bonus. I don't try to make that like my main source of income. So right now my monetization is more focused on like sponsors and things like that. In the beginning, yeah, you can totally you know, see the influx of money coming in from people viewing your stuff. I will say try not to depend on that too much, because it does change frequently. And, you know, a lot of times it depends on what audience you are pitching to. You know, the tried and true method for making a lot of money on YouTube is making tutorials for people that are like in the age range of like over 65, because they are the people that are going to want to pay money for ads that they see, rather than the demographic that is like, you know, 18 to 25, because they have a little less money to spend. So ads that are pushed to them don't yield as much back for you as the creator. So unfortunately for me, my niche is animation, which tends to be very like kid focused. So a lot of the stuff that I will push out sometimes won't get as high payouts, because they're going to an audience demographic that doesn't have as much cash on hand to spend. But if you're posting videos that are specifically like, you know, tutorial videos for people that in their 60s, 70s, whatever, that like it's like that's the running joke with YouTube, is that tends to be the highest payout, because you're speaking to a demographic that has more cash on hand to spend on ads. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't worry too much in the beginning about the monetization of it. And I try to really just look at that as a nice bonus if I can. But you know, I do obviously like to make money with my company. So the views that I get from social media, I feel are more like advertising than what I want to get back from them, if that makes sense. So yeah, hope that answers your question.
Can you talk through on like the second part of that question? I just shared my screen here.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at like in your comments, you have your equipment, which are Amazon links. You have, you know, a link to your Kickstarter. And let's, I guess, apply this to like, you know, you're running a VR startup, you want to collect emails, you want to get people to download your app. How do you think about taking this video, for example, has 250,000 views? Like, how do you convert those 250,000 views to, you know, 300 people that take action on your call to action in the comments?
Yeah, no, I think making the call to action as specific as possible, I found has really helped. So you can say things like, comment, subscribe, but people will usually tune out that like very general thing. But if you're saying something very specific, like, oh, if you know, like for example, my company, We're taking a more animation focused approach to VR than what we've seen. So my example would be like, oh, if you like really appealing animation and you are interested in emerging technologies, then you will love the link that I have on my website, which you should go check out and subscribe to email updates like that. So as specific as possible as you can be with your calls to action in that regard, I think will help, like specifically point people towards something. Because you can, I mean, the critique there could be, well, if you're just sending people to your website, they're going to get overwhelmed and, they might not click on something. But if you're saying like, if you go to my website and sign up for my email list, like as specific as possible as you can be, people will usually tend to follow through on that when you are being specific with what you're asking for, rather than just saying, oh, follow me for more. You can totally say that, and that will remind people to follow you for sure. But the more specific you can be with your call to action, I think the more likely people are to follow through on that. Especially if you're saying things like, comment on this video what your favorite animation movie is, and that generates a discussion in the comments that other people that are in your audience can engage with, other members of your community, and then that leads them to become super fans of your brand and of your thing. So in that regard, I think generating this community and being very specific about what you want them to do has, for me at least, yielded pretty decent results with being just as specific as possible, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so Scott, we're gonna give you the honor of last question here, and then Zach, if you have any closing statements after that, we'd appreciate that. And I'll share the link for everything you're doing in school. I think everyone should follow you and kind of understand the way you're going about doing this, as well as when you launched Kickstarter, you got your first donor in me for sure. So thank you for your time.
Awesome.
All right, Scott.
Thank you so much.
I'll pass you the mic here. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Yeah, thank you, Don. And Zach, thank you so much for having this presentation, being open to questions. My question is specifically regarding timing. I've done a lot of research on this, and it can be really difficult to find the niche window for when to post certain things, when to upload certain things. There's even a lot of chatter around the fabled kingmaker slots on certain platforms, right? Where you're trying to hit those areas where you're going to be at highest discoverability. I just wanted to get your take on what you think about all that.
Yeah, I have gotten very into the weeds at some points of like specifically when to post, especially like, TikTok or Instagram seems to be, the piece of content that you post will get buried in the algorithm because so many people are posting, and the stuff that rises to the top is usually like relevant to current times or things like that. YouTube is a little more evergreen with that. So I have gotten really into the weeds of like when to post. I usually find that if I'm posting, generally speaking, like in the mornings for it, especially to kind of answer the other question too about the localization of this too. If you're posting around the times of the morning for like the US, people are usually more likely to, give it a shot and to watch it. But even like towards the end of the day, people are, they're off from work, they're exhausted, they're a little bit more, they're, reaching for their phone for entertainment value or, for something educational based. But, even the platforms that I have found that have these exact times to post, videos between 10 and 11 will do better than videos posted 11 to 12. Usually what those are saying is just paying attention to the cultural zeitgeist. So, for example, in the summer when kids are out of school, let's say the opposite. When kids are in school, if you're posting videos, then you're marketing to let's say you're making an app that is marketed towards children. If you're posting videos during school hours, then they're not going to be the ones to see it because they're in school. So it's really just being aware of like just the cultural zeitgeist of what is happening and like where your audience would be at that particular time. Around lunchtime for your niche is a good time too, because people, they're taking a break from work and they're pulling out their phones and they're scrolling through social media and things like that. So, there are some social media gurus that will try to say like, okay, the best times to post have changed and you need to hear all this. A lot of times it's just that the people that are on these apps are just adapting to what times they're using the apps and for how long they're using the apps, things like that. So I have put less of an emphasis on that in the recent kind of weeks and months, because I've been fortunate enough where the people that I'm posting to now, they will want to seek it out. But I think that also speaks to a good point, is that if you can generate this community and generate this audience and foster this community of people that are engaged with what you are, what your vision is, and then also what your company is preaching, they will be more likely to share that video or like seek it out, share it with friends of theirs. And I think like that will kind of, exponentially grow your engagement from there, because, once people are seeking your stuff out and you're getting this organic reach, that's kind of where, things start to really happen. But yeah, I would focus more on fostering the community side rather than worrying so much about what times to post. Obviously, just be aware of like, don't don't post things at midnight where no one's going to see it. And then the algorithm might think that it's not a good video because everyone's asleep, when it actually might be really good. But yeah, I hope that kind of helps frame that a little bit. Awesome. Yeah.
This was awesome, Zach. Thank you for your generosity here. You don't go to college and study this stuff, so you kind of have to learn from people like yourself.
Absolutely not.
And
this
I
is
feel like
mostly trial and error.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff you see online is, these, lack of better word, people I don't really trust. And so it's cool to have you come here with this presentation you made for us. That means a lot. Thank you for giving your time to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I would just say as like a closing remark, like, this stuff is hard. This stuff can be really difficult. And if you want to reach a community and foster that, it will probably be very daunting and very challenging. But if you can find the fun in it, because again, posting on social media and stuff like that, it should be fun. We should all be having fun, like being entertained by videos, learning things. It shouldn't be so stressful that you get paralyzed with this. So if it stops being fun, take a step back from it, reevaluate. You can always come back. It's taken me, 10 years to even try to have some semblance of a presence online. And in the beginning, I was trying stuff out. It wasn't working. I would, reframe, try something else. So as long as you're willing to just keep trying and keep being open to learning new things, you can at least connect with one additional person that you might not have connected with before. And, a community doesn't have to be hundreds of thousands of people. It can start with 2. It can start with you and somebody else, and you can bring in a third person. Start small, lower your expectations of where you should be right away. The pressure of the numbers and the followers and everything, it can get super overwhelming. So just focus on being authentic, creating content that people want to watch. And just it's all fake anyway,
We talk about this concept. Yeah, we talk about this concept maybe last month. It's called the Lindley effect, which is basically the longer something exists, the more likely it is to exist in the future. And fundamental to a startup existing or a YouTube page is that you have to enjoy the process to some extent. And so you've talked a lot about there, but also you said, you kind of balance your mental state of like, I didn't want to be on this hamster wheel, so I didn't. And I think that's really underrated and important to people, for people to understand that it is about longevity more than it is about sprinting and burning yourself out.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you're still working on your startup first and foremost, and that should be your priority. So if the social media stuff starts to get overwhelming, pull back on it. That's very much allowed. It's not like you're going to miss the boat. Like, I started 2 years ago, really like full-time posting content online, trying to grow. At that point, I was thinking, oh, I should have started in 2016 when, it was so much easier to grow online. In my opinion, I don't think it's too late to start growing your community online. I don't think that ship has sailed quite yet. So what's the expressions? The first best time was 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. I fully subscribe to that. I think it is very possible for you to still take advantage of social media here in 2024 when things are crazy. But yeah.
Awesome. All right. If everyone can clap it up for Zach here. Thank you, Zach, for coming and joining us. We appreciate that.
Thank you so much. This was so
I'll
much
post the
fun. I
recap.
really appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, this was awesome. I'll post the recap into the school community. I'll put all the links to everything you have as well. And then we really appreciate this. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for having me. Nice to meet you all.
Yep, absolutely.
All
All
bye
right,
now.
so adios. Rick, I see you missed it. I'll post the recording. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and go through how I've used a lot of these principles for X and LinkedIn. And I'll actually give kind of like the founding story of how the Spatial Collective came out of X and LinkedIn. So just real quick, it was about a year ago, I saw this guy online who was creating creator courses, and he somehow convinced me to pay $4,500, which was like the most I've ever paid for anything in my life. He convinced me to pay him $4,500 for him to for me to join his school community. And at the time, I was very hesitant, and it kind of ended up being one of the greatest decisions of my life. Because I learned a lot about how all this organic stuff works. And so I'm going to walk through two specific examples, one on X and one on LinkedIn, about kind of the principles he taught me and how I use them to get the Spatial Collective seeded and started. This applies to B2B, this applies to B2C. It's the exact same concept, and it's worked really well. So I guess first thing, can everyone see my screen when I shared it? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, cool. So actually, I'm going to start with my LinkedIn one. So Alexis is a member of our Spatial Collective. And so this was 7 months ago initially when I don't know if I emailed him first or he emailed me, but basically I found out that he had this repository of best practices for AR, VR developers. And it's a public repository. Anyone who finds the website can go access this repository. It's amazing. Like, he's got videos in there. He's got best practices. It was like something that I thought was really, really valuable. So I emailed him and I asked Alexis, can I basically use this repository as a lead magnet so that I can then post this on my LinkedIn, which I have a strong following on, and see if we can get some sort of virality around this and start to collect emails for it. And so this was what I posted on LinkedIn. It says, AR, VR startups are hard, huh? Let's make it easier. So there's my hook. You know, I think that resonates with a lot of founders. AR, VR startups are hard. And so this was kind of like my way of thinking, okay, that'll hook people. And here is a resource that actually does make it easier that you can use. So the next line is, here's a list of 150 free resources for AR, VR, XR design and development. I talk a little bit about the credibility of this. You know, Apple's in there, Meta's in there. There's some AR, VR startups in there. I give the data source. And then this is kind of like the key thing that helped this one post go viral, was I said, comment XR startup below, and I'll email you the repository. So we ended up, this has 654 comments on this LinkedIn post, which that's not a lot compared to some of these influencers on LinkedIn. But for me, you know, that was massive. And I think this ended up getting like 70,000 views or something. You know, there's 300 likes here, 40 reposts, which again is not huge for some of these LinkedIn influencers, but like relative to my account, which has 13,000 followers, this outperformed anything else I did. And so what people did was they would comment XR startup in the comments, and then I would respond with, on the left, you see my comment, it says, epic, thank you so much for commenting. You can submit your email here and I'll send you the repository of best practices. So that was kind of my way of being able to take the top of funnel, which was that 600 or 6,000 views and impressions, and then move people down the funnel into actually getting emails from there. And then I would send all of the people that gave me their emails the repository, so that I was delivering on the promise that I promised inside of my post. And after I would send that in email, I went through all the comments again, and I would comment, hey, I just sent you the repository in email. please reshare this post if you can. And here's an example of Amy who said, thanks and will do. And so like basically from little more, it took me $0. It was a free resource that was already on the internet. However, it was not accessible. I was able to now go get, 100, 200 emails just from posting this in this intelligent way where you provide a hook, capture an email, send the value to people in email, and then ask for a favor once you've delivered on that value. This was a really great way to get basically the Spatial Collective started, because in the email where I sent the repository, I could then also send another call to action around like, hey, I want to start this collective, come to this meeting if you want to hear about what we're trying to do here. And at this point, I had almost no idea what was going to happen with Spatial Collective. I don't even think I had the name for it at this point. But it was like kind of, a very important inception point where I had a list of believers that could then help me with this type of stuff. So how does this apply? Well, I'll go into one more. Not only did it work once 8 months ago, but last month, I literally one-to-one just copy and pasted the exact same text, didn't change anything, reposted it, and that got 20,000 impressions, and we got another 100 emails from that as well. By the way, I sent Alexis all the emails as a thank you, like that was the agreement, we share them. But like to me, this was really powerful because it goes to show that not only can you deliver on getting leads from LinkedIn for free, but you can also repost that content again and reuse it over and over. And so this is kind of like what Zach was talking about, where you can repost the same thing across different channels. I just waited 8 months and then reposted on the same channel and was able to engage with a different group of people. So this was something that was really important. And if you think about like, this worked for me helping find AR/VR founders, but this works for a B2B solution. This works for a B2C solution just as well. The key is you have to figure out what is the piece of value that you can repurpose and give to people that attracts your target audience. And so here is another example. This was on X. So I went through Reddit and I found this very cool video that had a download like the creator on Reddit who posted it gives you the option to download the video. So I went on Reddit, I downloaded the video, I scheduled the tweet to go out using Buffer, which if you aren't familiar, that is a social media scheduling platform. And I woke up a few days later after the video had posted and checked my Twitter, and all of a sudden it had 50,000 views, and it ended up running to 500,000 views. But to me, this was like way outperforming my Twitter following. It's not a platform I'm that active on. And so how did I use this to then, again, capture value from Twitter? Once I saw this post started running and it got to the first 100,000 views, I replied to my own tweet with a Calendly link that said, hey, if you want to talk more about VR, here's a way to do that RSVP to this event. And so that ended up getting 6,000 views, and we probably got an extra 50 or so RSVPs to that event. And so these are like two. Now I'm not doing this every day. In fact, I haven't posted in a long time. But when I was active and when I was using the principles that Zach talked about and the ones that I paid for to learn last year, it really works. Like this stuff really does work, and you never know what's going to hit. So, I probably downloaded 20 videos from Reddit, and most of them got 0 views. And then this one happened to get 500,000 views. I did not know this one was going to be so successful. I had, 0 idea. However, I was quick to act, because once I saw it was starting to take off, I immediately replied to myself with a call to action. And then through osmosis, people that saw the top post also see the bottom post. So these principles that Zach talks about on YouTube and TikTok and Reels also work on LinkedIn and X. He's a great example of them working on those 3 platforms. I'm a much less great, smaller example of these working on X and LinkedIn. However, like clearly this has brought value. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that, and we'll open up the floor. We have 15 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions around that LinkedIn side of this or the X side of this? And I'll see if I can draw some comparisons from the class that I paid for and took over the last year. Krasny? Yep, go for it.
Yeah, just a quick question about LinkedIn. Do you spend any time per day or per week just going around relevant AR/VR startup posts and commenting, just trying to be useful to other people? Maybe on other platforms as well.
I think it's a very viable strategy to go comment on other people's posts on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever your choice of platform is. However, I made the personal decision not to. I don't have LinkedIn on my phone. I don't have X on my phone. I rarely ever have Instagram downloaded. I've found that as soon as I start opening up those apps and trying to go, add value and comment on other people's stuff, 30 minutes go by and I'm either worked up about something or I'm distracted or I feel jealous of someone on there. So I personally do not like those platforms being near me. I use them purely as, for lack of a better word, a spam bot to push stuff out and then forget about it, set it and forget it. But it is a very viable strategy. And I think, if you're employing somebody, even if you go on Fiverr and you can hire someone for a very low rate, I do think it's viable to, as much coverage as you can get across different posts is surface area for luck. So I would definitely not recommend that that's a bad idea. I just personally cannot deal with the social media platforms. Anyone have any thoughts, questions around what Zach was saying? Anything you want to talk about, like that you're excited to try this week? I think that was a really, really valuable insight into how this stuff works.
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit. So this is really interesting because I've actually been doing probably 3 weeks worth of hard research on this topic myself, trying to figure out what makes the difference between someone like Pirate Software, who has this fantastically large community of very passionate people who, in a heartbeat, will jump to his defense and, he says, "Hey, go check this out," and next thing you know, there's like 100,000 people going and checking out that thing. Versus other influencers who you would think would not have problems driving a community and yet don't have the same kind of influence that Pirate Software does. And it seems to be, and I could be wrong on this, but Zach was echoing a lot of the same stuff, so I'm gonna lean on it. It seems to be that right now, social media really more than anything is about heart, right? And what I mean by that is, the more you shill, as they call it, or the more you advertise, the more you really just try and peg a particular product or service. Basically, the more you seek your own benefit, the less you're gonna get, right, in terms of followers and attention and everything else. But the more you seek to help others, the more you seek to raise up other posters, other influencers, and talk about things that are on people's minds. That's where you start getting the community, and it becomes strong very quickly, very passionate. And then you can start to lance in things about your product and stuff like that, but not as a, "Oh, hey, let me advertise," but rather as a, "Hey, I noticed this is a problem point for a lot of the people in my community. Just so you know, this is a way that you could help yourself by doing X, Y, or Z." And I heard a lot of the same kind of stuff from Zach, but I kind of want to get your take as well, Don, because you've mentioned some of the same stuff as well. It, in general, is that more or less where we're at right now in the social media landscape?
I think from studying it, yes. And then also just speaking from my personal experience, I mean, if you go back 10 years on my LinkedIn, I'm talking about VR startups. So I basically have said the exact same thing for 10 years, in different comments and whatever. So I feel like one of the reasons why I asked Alexis if I could use his repository on my LinkedIn was because I feel like I had built up some level of brand and trust from people. And so I knew, like, worst case, this is at least going to get 1,500 views. Yes, I will share the recording, Danny. So I think, like, that's important, is like, yes, you need to build up some sort of level of credibility around what you're talking about, which does take some time. And so that's why I think probably the earlier you can get started on this stuff for your startup, the better. Speaking from experience on my last startup, we hired, her name was Mital, and she previously worked at Jiho, which was kind of like Spotify, but for India. And she was one of their first hires. She scaled them to 100 million, and they ended up exiting. And so I was like, oh, this is going to be a cakewalk. Like, she's going to come in here and, you know, we're going to pay her 200 grand a year, and she's going to just do everything for me. And we're going to go viral overnight for my last startup. And she was amazing. But what I learned very quickly was that because we hadn't been building our voice on social, because we hadn't been building any sort of presence, you know, before she got there, there's just like this fundamental 2 to 3 month buildup that she had to go through, that as the CEO, I was very frustrated by, because, you know, we needed stuff now, right? But so I think, like, probably the best advice after hearing this is have low expectations, start today, and again, just go with Zach's mindset of try to do the stuff that you enjoy and is fun, and let that kind of organically build. And eventually, when you need to ask for something, you'll have the credibility to ask for it. Yep.
If I can plus one on that really quick, would it also not be a good strategy to kind of piggyback with other influencers and kind of tie the channels together in that way? So, like, for example, kind of like a fireside chat or a podcast style, where you find someone else who maybe isn't a giant, but they're bigger than you are, right? And they're willing to bring you on, and maybe a few others. And through that, you can kind of accelerate your exposure, at least.
I'm probably one of the best examples of that. You know, like last week we had the event with Moritz from Lightspeed.
Hmm.
He's a great example of, like, almost everyone I sent that invite to said yes. We had 500 RSVPs for that. I would have had to work really hard to get 500 people coming and listen to just me. But by leveraging his brand, we're able to now get the 500. See you, Luke. We're able to get, you know, a solid amount of interest. I've basically done that for 10 years. I've always subscribed to that, is go find someone that people want to listen to and then host a fireside with them. It's personally really interesting for me. Like, I just learned a ton from Zach. That was awesome. Like, I would have come to this whether I was hosting or not, you know, but it's also a great shortcut to get people there without needing to rely on your previous credibility. So I do think that is a really good way to do this stuff.
Awesome. Thanks.
Any last closing thoughts, anybody? If not, I'll talk about what we're doing next week. All right, cool. So next week is special. We have Inga from Shapes XR. She is a badass. She's raised $8+ million. Their product, Shapes XR, I think we're all familiar with. If not, majority of us have probably used it or have tried a product that's built using the prototyping system. And she's going to come talk with us on Wednesday in a very similar style chat. That'll be about founder mindset, how she got sales done on the enterprise side, the B2B side, how she's kind of built her brand, and how she does her fundraising as well. So that's someone that I think, you know, a lot of us want to emulate the progress she's made over the last 10 years. And so that'll be a really good one. You can RSVP for that in school, and I'll also send out an email sometime when I get back to Florida that'll have the RSVPs for that as well. But that should be really cool. I hope everybody comes there, and yeah, let's keep growing. All right, thank you everybody for coming. Appreciate it. I'll post Zach's stuff in the collective, and please, if you get a chance, send him a thank you. He made that presentation. That was really kind to him. So just send him a thank you if you're able to get a hold of him. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time.